That's true. Healthcare costs are driven by lots more than just your episode in the hospital or episode in the emergency room or your visit to the physician. They're driven before that by social factors that really affect your health. For instance, imagine if you live in an apartment complex where the filters on the HVAC system haven't been changed in a decade, and you have respiratory issues. You're going to be coming to the emergency room a lot more frequently with asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease than you might if your housing were better. Imagine if you have type 2 diabetes and you can't afford foods that aren't high in sugar and fructose. You're going to be winding up with downstream problems from that high hemoglobin A1C, all the problems that the consequence of not being able to control your glucose. And we can go on and on. The ability to even be transported, to go to a doctor, to find time in your schedule, to be able to leave your employment. All these social factors determine healthcare costs. And we in this country don't really spend enough time dealing with those social consequences, those determinants that really do affect healthcare outcomes.
So that's the much bigger picture, but taking a more surgical, forgive the pun, approach to this. I mean, you actually say that there are ways that perhaps the U.S. government could help, I don't want to say help drug makers, but help subsidize the cost for American consumers of those products. And that would be to use trade talks as a method. How would that happen?
Well, think about this. We talk about unfairness in trade, and we marvel at the fact that U.S. drug costs are 2 to 6 times higher than they are in the rest of the world. The answer to that is obvious for why it happens. In all the other parts of the world, the government is the only payer, and they set the price. In the United States, we have a free market. But what I don't understand is why in trade talks don't we make this a prominent issue? Why don't we say, you guys can't allow the U.S. consumer to be subsidizing all the R&D costs of drug development? You've got to pay your fair share. We want to see you add 20% to the cost of your drugs. Now, obviously, if that happens, we need the drug manufacturers to all agree that they're not going to raise U.S. prices, that they're going to come down in proportion to what they can get from the rest of the world. But I think this should be a leading discussion in trade talks about how the U.S. is being unfairly penalized here for the cost of drugs around the world.
We listed a number of other measures that you propose would help with drug pricing and that issue, including speeding up the generic process, which really happened to some extent under the former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, and also some changes to patent law. But I wanted to get your take, Dr. Davis, on where you think the solution would be. I mean, there's so much talk amongst the candidates out there for president right now about how they would approach this issue. Is it going to be a government solution in your view, or is it going to come, do you think, from the private sector, from people who think out of the box, like Amazon, J.P. Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway, for instance?
Well, look, I think one of the real drivers is our inability to have a patent process, patent law that really deals with innovation. We have to recognize that the vast majority of drugs that get approved and are branded and have market exclusivity because of patent protection are Me Too compounds. Patent law encourages duplication, not innovation. We have to ask, why do we allow that to happen? How come we don't really allow truly breakthrough compounds to have a preference over compounds that are really no small difference from other drugs that are in the same category? Let me tell you the consequences of that, and one of the things we can do about it. We talk about Medicare should negotiate drug prices. Obviously, that's catastrophic for the pharmaceutical industry, and they lose their ability, they would say, to invest in new research. But what if the Medicare said, we're not negotiating drug prices, but we're not going to put that drug on our formulary because it's no better than drugs that we already have, and many of those drugs are already generic. Example is antidepressants.
Right.
Just one example. Until the approval of esketamine, there has been no new mechanism of action of antidepressants in nearly 50 years. But yet there's new drug after new drug that gets patent protection and gets a high price in the market. Why does patent law allow that to happen? I can explain why if we had more time, but we really need to get the Congress to start to focus on why don't we get innovation instead of duplication in drug world?
Those are some great examples. Dr. Davis, we appreciate the conversation.